Greetings. I am Dorothy Dowling, a principal of DEI Advisors. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to personal empowerment. I am delighted to welcome Fran Brasseux, CEO of the International Council on Hotel, Restaurant, and Institutional Education, otherwise known as ICHRIE, to our show today. Fran, it is an honor to have you with us today.
And it's about time we connected on this, right? So thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Fran, it's always a pleasure to be with you. So, Fran, when we start with each one of our DEI advisors, we always like for them to share their career journey. And when I think about all the different things you've done, you were in the hotel space directly as a senior hotel executive in a global role, driving commercial success. You've been an association executive for about half your career, partly with HSMEI and now with ICRE. So I'm wondering if you can share your journey with us and how your executive role has powered your career in the association space.
It wasn't a plan. It just built, right? I've always had good intuitions and most of the time listen to them. Not all the time, but most of the time listen to them. But I'm not a natural association executive. Association work is hard. It doesn't move as fast as the corporate world, and it doesn't make decisions quickly. It requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of consideration on the membership views and the membership needs, but it makes an impact. And it's the impact that drew me to the association side, because you can work in an individual business and make a difference, but you can, in an association world, you're going to make a difference with about 100 times more businesses and opportunities. But it is a complex world, and it doesn't move as fast as I would like it. So I'm not known for being the most patient person. I am known for being the most relentless one. And especially now in the academia side, our members are so smart and they're so strategic, and it's an honor to work with them. But the ideas they have every day require implementation, right? It's a very interesting place, but it's a place that intentionally I joined to collect knowledge and to be able to make a difference between hospitality industry and hospitality education coming together. Been on both sides and know that often they get siloed. So there's so much value in collaboration between the two. It's fun to bring it together.
Wow. No, that's very impactful. And I loved your 100X story in terms of impact and legacy that you can leave, Fran. I'm wondering if there has been a personal mantra that has driven your journey and if you'd be willing to share that with us.
I asked my husband that question because I said, "You're going to ask me about a personal mantra. What do you think?" And he said, well, "You want me to tell you what I think?" And I said, "That's why I asked you." And he said, "It's because," he said, you've been able to, when you hit a wall," he said, "Fran, you never give up." He said, "You go over it, through it, around it, whatever it takes to make it happen." And he said, "I think that's your strength." He said, "You really do find a way to make things work, even the most complicated problems over time you could solve." And he said, "So I think your mantra is you could break down any wall, just give you a little time." But I would also tell you that I do think it requires now more patience than I had when I was younger. And time sometimes gives you more patience, right? I am more patient, and I do now seek first to understand and then to act, which is not always something I've done. I know in some early psychological testing and such, when you join companies and they do tests and such, I would always be the rocket ship. I was the one that's going to go on. But I do know now you need to understand the business. You need to understand the impact and understand the reasons why the first decisions were made, and then see what you can do to enhance. I've gotten more wise in that.
It's interesting when you said about your journey not being necessarily intentional, but when you think about you being a rocket ship when you're driving commercial business, Fran, that was probably what was needed. And now you're in the association space where you have to be more consultative. So patience is what you needed. And I think that would be relating back to your husband's testimony that you always figure it out. Whatever the challenge is, you have a pathway to, whether it's over, above, around, you figure it out. And that
Well,
has been
these
my
days
experience.
because of course everything's more complicated. I'm
Oh,
sure
for sure.
oh my God. So it's never done on the first try. It usually takes a number of tries today, right? So you have to be relentless, and you also have to be patient. Again, two things that took some time to learn.
No, I think that's a really great framework. I'm also wondering if you can share with us people that might have been impactful to your career. Most of us have someone in our lives that was an important ally or champion in terms of our career journey. Is there anyone that was particularly impactful to you?
A lot of people. So I had, naturally curious and I like to take on challenges. So when I moved from airline to hotel, of course, there was a whole learning curve on that. That wasn't a natural move that many years ago. Most of the time, everybody stayed in their lanes, right? So when I moved to hotel, I had to learn from everybody. I had to listen. I had to learn. And the same thing happened in association world. I hadn't had any experience there, but that's where I went to work after a hotel experience, and I had to learn what that looked like, which was much different than on the corporate world. And you'll think this is pandering, but Dorothy, you were part of that learning. So I watched how you handled, you were on our board at the association I was working with at that time, HSMA, and I watched how you worked the politics. I watched how you shared your wisdom. I watched your generosity, and I just saw how you handled cultures and people. And you did it very successfully. So you may not have known I was learning from you at the time, but I was. And I think there's a lot of people in hospitality who are absolutely amazing, and they're so willing to share their stories and offer advice, make contacts for you. You feel like a responsibility now as you advance along to do that for others. But you were someone I learned from on how to handle the boards and how to handle advice in a way that made change but didn't break relationships.
Mm-hmm. That's very kind of you to say, Fran.
It's true. It's true.
I thoroughly enjoyed the leadership journey through HSMAI, mostly because of the remarkable people that we were both privileged to work with. So we have some mutual admiration for each other. And
we
I know,
absolutely do. So in
yeah,
the hotel world, I was thinking about that time too. And I was thinking I was at the Forte and Le Meridian Group for 11 years, and two amazing leaders really that I think about. Andre Cow was the CEO, and James Hogan was the managing director, and both based in Europe. And I was in New York, and they were so remarkable in the way they handled, again, your style in that politics and cultures. That was more of a globalization than perhaps I'd been even at the airline when I was with Pan Am. But they just handled really problems and issues in a way where, interestingly enough, people weren't angry. They just understood they had to make change. And I'm often someone who shortcuts the weight and wants to get to the story. So I've had to learn that sometimes the journey needs to be a little slower and the understanding needs to be a little slowly given. But they were absolutely mentors and amazing leadership skills, and gone on to do great other things. But they were, I was privileged to work with them and to watch how they worked. And in some of the cases, it was in the public relations area where I was watching how they would work the journalist and how they would work the story and how they would create something different than actually I remembered in some cases, but beautifully done.
storytelling and communication is a pretty important leadership skill. And when you're in a brand, I think somehow contextualizing what you stand for is a real skill that a lot of brand leaders hone over time. But you were an amazing leader when you were at 40 hotels as well, Fran. And I do think that sales and commercial leadership that you were able to bring to HSMAI really helped the organization, because associations, the financial being is something that has to be attended to. So you've got to be able to encourage
And that's
that revenue
that
stream.
often is the biggest struggle. So it is, I will tell you, I think I've always been in sales and marketing, right? But the sales leadership and the sales work often doesn't get the credit it deserves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And nothing happens without that. So you can't get to the finances if you haven't got the money to count. Right? It's a skill that's really needs to be in everybody's repertoire, right? It's because if you can't sell yourself, or you can't sell an idea, you also can't move a business, right? So it's all part of that selling process. But that's been a great part of my background, is the ability to be able to build those relationships and keep them over long times. They're valued. It turns into family, especially in hospitality. We're all so tightly connected. It's a small world there, isn't it?
Said, yes, we crossed paths many times through our career, and the richness of the relationships, I think, are part of what keeps our career going at such an incredible level, because we all support each other and mentor each other and actually refer things to each other as opportunities present themselves. So you're absolutely right, Fran.
When I transferred from the Forte Hotel Group, and I had my car service and my apartment, and started work at the association world, in that case at HSMAI, one of my first business trips was to see one of our colleagues in Indiana. And how was I going to get from Indianapolis or whatever I was coming into, maybe Chicago, into whatever it was, Lake Station. And they said, well, there's a bus. And I went, a bus? So the association world is a little different.
For sure. The budgets and
It's upgraded
yeah.
now at least to a rental car, but it's not a chauffeured car.
Yeah.
But it is it's a chance to make an impact. And
Yeah.
I do like that, and I think that's part of hospitality, serving other people and caring about, others' growth and other success. So it's important, but the finance part of it is always the tough part. Even when I was number 2 at HSMAI and number 1, I wanted to be the leader, right? Wherever I went next. And here I am as a CEO, but I'll tell you, it's a tough spot. It all ends here, and that includes all the financial information, and it's been a great experience. I've been with ICHRIE now for it'll be 3 years in June, and
Wow.
I look a lot older than when I started.
I
It's
do
great.
think,
They're
yeah.
amazing. I'm really lucky. They are an amazing group. Uh, Deep friendships now that I never would have had. And they're so smart. That's
Yeah.
why I sometimes just don't understand why academia and industry can't collaborate closer. It's a, I know it's not everywhere, but it's a success story that needs to be still sold.
Yeah. I do think particularly now as talent has become such an important, or it's being recognized as such an important part of what leadership needs to bring to the table. I'm hoping that's going to pave the way forward for more co-innovation collaboration with academia, Fran. I wonder if I could ask you a little bit, because one of the other areas that I wanted to ask, which I know you have referenced already, just being in the association world, and particularly with your current role with ICRE, is really just the variety and diversity of stakeholder opinions and how you navigate all of that. Because as you pointed out, you have resource limitations in terms of dollars and people. So you've got to be able to prioritize, but be inclusive in terms of ensuring everyone is heard. How do you navigate all that so successfully?
Not well every day. Not well every day.
Okay,
So,
good.
but what I'll say is that's the sales experience too. How do you close a piece of business, right? Or how do you navigate that relationship to yes? And it's, I, I think understanding the business. I don't know that I could have been an association executive on any other business but hospitality, right? So because I understand a customer business, and so I can understand a little bit more about how to bring that value back to them from what we can do from the association. But so it's important to understand the business, and I would tell you that it's not easy. It's not
Mhm.
easy. It's a lot of time talking for my best interest and not enough time to do what you need to do. There's a lot of strategy that gets discussed, and that's important. But I've always been someone who really likes strategy, like the plan and like the approval, and then I move, right? And sometimes it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes it has different opinions that need or different approvals that need to be done. Most of the time, most of the time getting it through to that process makes it a better end product.
Mm.
It just takes a little more time, but the end product is often a lot better. And it's interesting how different viewpoints can improve things if you take the time to listen. It's just, as I told you earlier, I'm not the most patient person, but I do think I speak up a lot more than I used to.
Mhm.
And I think that's sometimes just experience over time. And I think, again, understanding both sides, both the hospitality industry and the education side. The part that still I can't get wrapped around is the research side. So
Mhm.
that's complex, right? So we have 4 different journals that I create in different areas, all hospitality generated, but in different ones about research, one's about education, one's about case studies, and one's about research studies, case studies together and connected to industry. And the process for that, I know the information, just to give you, I know the information's valuable, but it takes too long to get it. Doing that with industry where the problems are identified today and we want the solutions by Friday, right? And you can't wait 2 years.
Mhm.
So
Well, that's
how
yeah.
do you bring the abstract part of research to the surface a little bit
Mhm.
more and make it applied a little bit differently when it comes to working with industry to give it more value? Because a lot of the research is researchers looking at each other's work, and it's brilliant work and brilliantly presented, but it's not shared with industry.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting challenge. I know from when I was a student, Fran, it is that applied versus that basic research that obviously is going to drive transformational change. But those of us that are in the commercial environment have that applied lens in terms of wanting to drive to business outcomes. That is a very interesting challenge to think about how you drive that
I don't think in
balance.
my
Yeah.
lifetime I will solve it, but I
Yeah.
do think there's some advancements we can make with it. And I do think we've got a new partnership now with Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. I don't know if you know them,
Mhm.
but
We
they're
do. Yeah.
a
Mhm.
remarkable partner. And they're actually, we did a sustainable topic in all four of the journeys and introduced sustainable topics from their industry partners with some research ideas on what to do with that. And we've made it a competition through to our for awards at our conference this summer in July. And I think we'll see how that works out. But working with a partner who will help you with one of the things that the researchers in academia need is the data, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
they need data from the hotels, they need data from the restaurants, they need data for their research. So there needs to be deeper partnerships with that. But then, of course, the data has to be able to be shared because the
Yeah.
research needs to be shared. So it's work that's worth working on, but it isn't easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's and then of course the hospitality schools have certain requirements, right? The research departments have a whole certain process that has to happen.
Mhm.
I didn't even know what a DOI was until I
Mhm.
got into research. It's a lot of thoughtful work that would be better if it was shared a little
Mhm.
easier.
Yeah.
It's because it's some of it helps someone's tenure, but it doesn't necessarily impact what happens in the industry. Sometimes we're better at the articles than we might be at getting the information to the content of a research paper.
Mhm. That's an interesting challenge. I can understand some of the process requirements on the academic institutions in terms of the quality control they have.
Getting funding on that research,
Yeah.
they're getting so you've
Yeah.
got all
That's
different
good.
kinds of things, and you've got publishing that happens and restrictions on that. So
Mhm.
I don't continue to give up, but I do think it's one that's hard to push to change.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that sounds like an interesting challenge. I need to think about some of that.
Yeah, find me a solution.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm wondering if we can talk. I know you're talking about challenges, and just in terms of your personal career journey, I'm just wondering if there were challenges that were big learning opportunities for you in terms of your growth and how that really shaped your career and some of the decisions that you made, because you've obviously taken some big bets in terms of from airline to hotel and now into the association space. Maybe you could share some of what that looked like for you.
When I moved from airlines, I was with Pan Am for
Mhm.
13 years and loved it. Would never have left, never would have left, except they went bankrupt. Right? So it was necessary to leave, and I was offered the job at a more senior role, and actually with considerably more income in New York. It meant I had to relocate to New York, and I was in Washington D.C. And the risk on that was it was a whole new business. It was hotels versus airlines, and I had a family in Washington,
Mhm.
and it wasn't. That was a while ago. It wasn't. It was a little different for women to take the lead or to jump out and do something that left the family behind. But my husband, it's the right partner, and I think you've had one too, Dorothy. The right
Mhm.
partner will support you on that and help with not all of the work, but help with some of the work. But the risk is I'm asking everybody to sacrifice for me. And I'm not very good about asking that, but I did and I have. And then I've tried to make life better for them on what I've done. So it's not always an easy decision.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting way you characterized in terms of the sacrifice wasn't just your sacrifice, it was your family that also had to make some of that decision in terms of your move. And I do know that you've been an amazing parent and grandparent to your family, Fran. And I do think that is how we hopefully pay it back or pay it forward. I'm not sure which, but
If they'll take the help.
yes. Yeah.
Some of ours
Yeah.
are teenagers now, and it's not as easy.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's an interesting characterization about how everyone had to make those trade-offs and how important your family was in terms of supporting you and taking those risks.
Just as talking, Dorothy, maybe that's how some of the understanding of how collaboration works develops over your career time, right? So the idea to the family, everybody had to collaborate on what was going to do and what it would look like and when were you going to be where and what you could do. And oh yes, we could have some fabulous vacations, but they're only coming 3 or 4 times a year, right?
Mhm.
But you're going to be gone.
Yeah.
So what does that do for us? Who's going to pick us up? Who's going to help us with the homework? All those things that resolve itself, but take time
Yeah.
and takes everybody working towards a goal because
Mm.
it's what someone wants to do. So you're right about the giving it to the children, and you're another amazing
Mhm.
mother. We both know our stories, and I will tell you that it's the greatest gift of life, right? And having the grandchildren, I have five now, five grandchildren. They're wonderful. Can't
Yeah.
spend enough time with them. But now it's not my time, it's their time, and they're too busy.
I do think that joy of being in someone else's life and being part of their life and helping them on their journey, it is a gift, as you have said. And I guess that really led me into sort of this question about this work balance, which I know you've spoken to, Fran. I sometimes challenge myself if there really is balance. You've always had to travel a lot. You've had a lot of jobs I know I've witnessed in terms of how much time when you're in the work is taken. There were lots of 70 and 80-hour work weeks. How did you find a way to preserve your health and preserve your overall well-being going through all of those challenging demands?
The first thing is, of course, you got to take care of yourself. So you have to take care of your health. And so what does that mean for who and when? And I've always been a very healthy eater, right? So I've always been very careful about my diet. And I'm sure that that's been a good thing. I could always tell you I need to do more exercise than I do.
Mhm.
I have bouts of it. I'll do 6 months of it, and then you won't see me for 6 months. but,
I share that.
but I think that all of that, and sometimes genetics weigh into it, and you didn't even have anything to
Mhm.
do with it, but all of that is required because the weeks are long and the work is hard. But what makes it for me doable was you love the work, you
Yeah.
love the work, and so you got to find what you love, and you got to find pleasure in what you create or what you do, right, and who you're working with. So it is. I come from a great mom and dad who were very hardworking, and my father was such a hard worker. He demonstrated integrity and work ethic, like most people through World War II did.
Yeah.
And if you weren't working hard, what are you doing? So you have to do it. If you're going to do something, you have to do it right. And if it takes hard work, that's what it takes, right? So there'll be a break in between, but now you've got to get it finished, right? And we all have deadlines, more so probably in the corporate world than in the association world, but we have them here too. But
Yeah.
in the corporate world, you got to have it by Friday, and it's got to be in
Mhm.
somebody's hands by then, and it's got to be ready, or the product's got to launch on Tuesday or whatever it is, and it's got to happen. And so there's really no choice. You've got to do the work, but you have to love the work. And I think, as you well know, hospitality has had a little bit of a bad hit during the pandemic,
Mhm.
and careers in the colleges and the enrollments in colleges are off a little bit in some cases, and people are looking at business schools and technology opportunities. All of that's in hospitality. We just called it hospitality. So we probably need to do a better story of our story, which is we are a business, and we are
Mhm.
the leading part of some of the tourism countries of the world, right? And one of the biggest employers, and have the most opportunities for working anywhere. And we know, and we don't tell the story often enough. So I think that I wouldn't have, if you had asked me, and I think you're going to get to the younger Fran. So what would the
Mhm.
younger Fran tell the older Fran? So I'll wait on that. But I would say that you have to love the work.
Mhm.
And if you're doing it just for the money, yeah, you won't be happy for very long. I do think the money comes when the work is recognized, and we both have had good careers on that, and great experiences through life that I've been able to share with the family. They would never have been able to go to Africa and China and Europe the way we've done
Yeah.
if I hadn't been in hospitality.
Yeah. No, that's very well said. And I love the thread that you were speaking about in terms of wellness and the relationship with happiness, Fran, because I do think, that is becoming a conversation today in terms of people understanding that linkage of the work that you do and the happiness that you feel in your work very much translates into your overall well-being. So maybe it
You've
was
been doing
something
a
we
lot of
just,
work on that. I've seen some papers
yeah,
and such you're putting forth, and that's
yeah.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And it
Thank
is
you.
years ago, I was a part of the Forte Meridian Group, and we were doing an international conference somewhere. I might have just been in, not just, but in Canada, not in
Yep.
Europe. It was in Canada, right? And walking in with the lead speaker, who was a doctor, I brought in someone who was going to talk about wellness, and I was saying, I've got like 5 seconds to ask you, what's the one thing, like running around like a
Mhm.
crazy New York woman, what's one thing you would tell me that I should do differently? And he said, stop drinking coffee. You know,
Oh.
oh, he said, "You got," and I went, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that." But he said, "Yeah," he said, "So I did for a while, lemon juice, but it's I don't think it's one solution.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one stop or it's one go. I think that it's moderation across everything,
Hmm.
thoughtfulness about it, and just being
Yeah.
careful about your diet and your exercise and your health. I
Yeah.
think you can't, you're the one, nobody's going to take care of it for you. You got to take
Yeah.
care of it for yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes that lesson is one we have to listen to much more frequently, Fran, because many of us put lots of other people ahead of ourselves in terms of taking care of our overall well-being. So that's very well said. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about public speaking, because all of the roles that I have worked with you on, Fran, you've always had a lot of presentations that you had to deliver. You had to work with media. Can you share with us how you honed your speaking skills, how you prepare for speaking engagements so that you can deliver on stage and execute so beautifully?
It's not always beautiful, but what
Okay.
I'll say is spend time on preparation.
Hmm.
So I'm never walking out there without something prepared. And I may not have everything prepared, but I've got my key points prepared. And most of the time, my knowledge will carry along with that. But it is, you really have to do the work and you really have to practice. You can't, it doesn't just happen. I think having an opening paragraph ready to go
Hmm.
is what usually carries me, because usually I can speak for a while without having to have notes, but the opening paragraph has to be set, so I have to know that, and then I have to have my points from that on. And I like to speak. I like to have speaking roles, but they always make me nervous. I've never gone on a stage where I haven't been nervous before. But then it's when your adrenaline starts to kick in, right? But I do think that preparation is really important, and for me, it's having that again that first part of my vocabulary to start, and then making sure that I have my key points, because I can ramble. So
Hmm.
that's not always the best thing to do when you're presenting. You certainly don't want to go over on time, but you want to understand what you know what the message is. This is it. You're doing a lot of public speaking now, and you know that it's draining. You come off that stage and you just want to go to the bar, right?
Hmm.
So but you don't. Instead,
Hmm.
you go and talk to people, right? But it takes a lot. You and I have known some really great speakers who have been very successful in that as a career. But I do know how hard they work before they go on that stage.
Yeah. But I think that's excellent advice, Fran. And I do think that's really important to our audience. The preparation is often hidden because people think that people have these natural skills that they just rely upon. But the reality that you have shared, and I certainly have witnessed, is that the best speakers are those that have great respect for their audience, invest the time in preparation, make sure they understand who they are speaking to, make sure the relevancy of whatever they're
Mhm.
delivering is meaningful. So I really appreciate your honesty about that. And I also appreciate the honesty that you've shared about how exhausting it is, because you are on stage and you have to be on your game to be able to deliver. And that takes a lot of energy as well as preparations. Both those points are extraordinarily important for our audience to have as takeaways. I know we referenced this a little earlier. I like the way you had said it, because we have advice for my younger self, but I loved the way you said, what would the older Fran say to the younger Fran? So let's ask that question. What would the older Fran say to the younger Fran in terms of advice today or sometime in
Stay
your
in
career?
school. I'd say stay in school. As a woman in business, you would have advanced faster and earned more money earlier had you gone on to get your master's or even your doctorate in hospitality. Imagine if we had had our doctorate, or you have your master's, don't you?
Mhm.
Yes, but imagine and I would have done it in finance, right? To be the strongest we could be in the environment that we're not always expected to be the strongest in, right? I would have done it. I would have done something in the finance area. So I would have told my younger self, be patient, Fran. You don't need to get out there and work right away. Stay in school a couple more years. You're
Mhm.
here, get it done while you're here. Would have been my one advice. And the other advice probably would have been take better care of yourself. Take better care of yourself. You don't have to do everything today. Sometimes pacing it a little bit might be better results on things. And also I think that take care of your friends.
Mhm.
They'll be with you forever.
Yeah. I think those are all beautiful thoughts, Fran, in that I do think that many of us, when we are young, we're always racing to get to somewhere, and understanding that your career is really a marathon, not a sprint, and to take your time and enjoy the journey, I think is important. And I do think understanding that need to take care of yourself and I fundamentally believe that there have been so many very important people in my life that I treasure the fact that they're still part of my life, you included. But I do think that
Thank you.
is about you've got to take some time and effort to connect with people, and that means you have to put it on your list to do. It's not something that will just happen unless you make some effort associated with it. So thank you for that. The last question we always ask everyone, Fran, is our whole mission with DEI advisors is really empowering personal success. So I don't know if there's any piece of final wisdom that you would like to share with our audience.
I think what you all have done at DEI and what David started and David Kong started is a very admirable endeavor. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now belonging is something we haven't always been good at, right? And whether it's, but I don't think it's unique to one group. I think it's a lot of groups. So I think women weren't always still aren't always treated equally. I think whether it's by color or by genetics or whether it's the Native Americans or whoever deserve some opportunities that maybe they didn't have before. But everybody deserves opportunities. But I think a focus on trying to make things more balanced is important. I think it's a troubling time right now, especially in Florida, and especially with some of the rules and regs that have come into Florida, where it's made it a little bit harder for some international groups to come in and do things, and that's not inclusive, even though it was intentional, but it is. Think about just with women, think about if we'd been in the workplace 50 years earlier, what could have been possible? I don't know about your mother, but my mother wasn't in the workplace and neither was her mother. And she thought I was crazy, but she also admired the fact that I wasn't going to just stay home. But I think diversity and inclusion, I think sometimes I should be careful with this, but I do think sometimes we've gone a little too far one way and come from the other way, and we need to find a way in the middle to make things more equitable. But I do think that the talent is everywhere. You just have to be patient enough to help train it or see it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really thoughtfully said, Fran. And I do think that is that nature of inclusivity, is trying to give everyone an opportunity to have a seat at the table and for them to be heard and respected. So I know that really is a very deep personal commitment that David Kong has made, obviously coming from China, Hong Kong, from where he is. He's obviously bootstrapped an amazing career, but that's part of his dream about what DEI advisors is, to hopefully help others in terms of supporting their journeys in some small way. So I thank you for your honesty. I do think it takes courageous leaders like you to always bring that story forward and to bridge some of the gaps we have in our industry, to help us all potentially see some of the areas that we need
So
to
I will tell
continue
you
to
with, I'm sorry, Dorothy.
Yep, no, go
With
ahead.
ICHRIE, it's very diverse. It's very diverse because, of course, so many of our students
International,
are
yeah.
international, right? And sometimes the language is a challenge, right? But I will tell you, it's the intelligence is amazing and the opportunity, right? So I do, and sometimes I will tell you, sometimes I think, oh, we just can't be that inclusive. We don't have the time. But most of the time we can be, and I do think the schools do a good job in most cases. I haven't found a case where they haven't done a good job, because that's part of who their demographics are, right? So much of the schools are again funded by international students and exchange programs.
Yeah. No, that's well said. And I do think that journey of learning from each other, and I've always really had great appreciation for the roles that I've had globally, to be able to learn from people from different parts of the world. Because I do think when you learn from someone when it is their own country and they can bring that lens to a conversation, it just makes you have a much deeper understanding of some of the challenges that we all need to get better at. So thank you for sharing that with us, Fran. I really appreciate the thoughtful nature of all of the content that you brought forward today, and it's always an honor to be with you. So I appreciate it. Well, if I may, this is the final part of the interview. So I also would like to thank and recognize our audience and say, if you've enjoyed this interview with Fran, I hope you'll also come to our website, deiadvisors.org, where you will see webcasts and podcasts from other industry leaders that I know will empower your knowledge and fuel your spirit. But if I may, thank you again, Fran, for all that you have meant to me through my career and for taking the time to share your wisdom with us today. It truly was a pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation and thanks you for the time. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Fran.
Thanks.